Welcome, new here or back again. Listen to the strings of rest that make everything else fade away. Hey, my name is Kriga, meaning fighter in Norwegian. My life has been made of ups and downs, just like yours. When I fall, I rise. I've fought wars nobody could see, carried weight I couldn't name. But in the chaos, in the noise, I found rest. Through the melodies of my father's birthplace and the deep fjords of the north, in those ancient strings and waters, I found peace, and I'm here to walk you there. And if by the end of this video you've found some peace, some rest, let me know with a simple like, a thumbs up, or drop a comment. It tells others searching that they're not alone, that someone else found rest here too. Remember to subscribe so the next video can find you when it's ready. More gentle sounds, more soothing scenes, more safe places where peace is waiting. Think of someone whose mind won't stop racing from morning until night, whose body stays tense no matter how hard they try to relax, who feels completely alone in the dark, scrolling through screens that only make things worse. Send this to them quietly. It might save their night, and the next day the way it saved yours, the way it once saved mine.
The descent into the Northern. The descent into the Northern light. The train slows as it approaches the final station, and I watch through the frosted window as the landscape transforms into something otherworldly. We've been traveling north for 2 days now, each hour taking us further from the familiar warmth of southern cities into a realm where light behaves differently, where time moves to its own ancient rhythm. The other passengers have thinned out over the journey, disembarking at small towns whose names I can barely pronounce, leaving behind the scent of coffee and the rustle of newspapers. Until now, I am nearly alone in the carriage, accompanied only by the gentle rocking of the train and the soft hum of the heating system working against the cold outside. Through the window, I can see endless expanses of white, not the pure, unblemished white of fresh snowfall, but a landscape texture with shadows and wind patterns, carved into drifts and ridges that speak of forces beyond human control. The sky above is a deep twilight blue, even though my watch tells me it is midday. This far north, in the heart of winter, the sun barely climbs above the horizon before beginning its descent again, painting everything in perpetual dusk, a world suspended between day and night. I press my hand against the cold glass, feeling the temperature seep through even the double-paned window. My breath fogs the surface, and I watch the condensation form patterns like frost flowers before slowly fading. Outside, a forest of pine trees passes by, each branch heavy with snow, creating shapes that look like outstretched arms or sleeping giants. The trees stand in patient silence, as they have for hundreds of years, indifferent to the small metal vessel carrying me through their domain. The conductor's voice comes over the speaker, announcing the final no more tracks, only wilderness and the communities that have learned to thrive in it. I gather my belongings slowly, reluctant to disturb the cocoon of warmth I have built around myself in this seat. My backpack is heavy with layers of clothing, with a journal I have been keeping, with a small wooden instrument wrapped carefully in soft cloth, a gift from a musician I met in Oslo who told me it would find its purpose in the north. The train comes to a complete stop with a sigh of air brakes and settling metal. I stand, pulling on my thick coat, winding my scarf around my neck, tugging on the wool hat that my mother insisted I bring. The door opens with a hydraulic hiss, and cold air rushes in. Not just cold, but a cold that seems to have substance, that wraps around you like an invisible presence, demanding acknowledgement. I step down onto the platform, and immediately I understand that I have crossed a threshold. The noise of the train engine, which had become so familiar it was almost silence, suddenly stands out against the profound quiet of this place. When the train pulls away, its red lights disappearing into the blue dusk, the silence that remains is not empty, but full of the whisper of wind across snow, the creak of ice settling, the distant call of a raven. Sounds so subtle they would be lost anywhere else, but here become clear and distinct, each one a statement in the vast conversation of the landscape. The station is small, little more than a covered platform and a single building that serves as both waiting room and ticket office. Warm yellow light spills from its windows, and I can see a figure moving inside, but I am not ready to go in yet. I need to stand here for a moment to let my body adjust, not just to the temperature, but to this different quality of existence. My eyes are cold. I can feel them watering slightly in response to the air, but my ears are warm beneath my hat, and I become aware of how these two sensations coexist, how the cold sharpens my senses, while the warmth comforts them. I close my eyes and listen, really listen, and beneath the wind, beneath the small sounds of ice and snow, I begin to hear something else, a resonance, as if the landscape itself is humming at a frequency just below normal hearing. It reminds me of the instrument in my pack, the Inanga, with its wooden body and metal strings, capable of producing sounds that seem to come from somewhere ancient and essential. The musician in Oslo had played it for me, his fingers moving across the strings with practiced ease, creating a music that was less melody than atmosphere, a sonic landscape as complex and subtle as the physical one I now stand in. A door opens at the station building and a woman emerges, bundled in layers of practical winter clothing. She raises a hand in greeting, and I recognize her from the photographs we exchanged. Astrid, who has agreed to rent me her cabin for the next month, who has promised to show me the rhythms of life this far north. I walk toward her, my boots crunching in the packed snow, each step a small declaration of presence in this vast space. "You made it," she says, her English excellent, but accented in that particular Norwegian way that makes even simple statements sound like observations of something profound. "How was the journey?" "Beautiful," I say, and the word feels inadequate, but she nods as if she understands everything I am not saying. "Come," she says, "my car is just here. The cabin is about 20 minutes away. We should go before the light fades completely though," she adds with a small smile. In winter, the light is always fading or always about to return. It becomes hard to tell the difference. Her car is road that winds through forests and along the edges of frozen lakes, past the occasional farmhouse with smoke rising from its chimney, past markers whose meaning I do not yet understand. Astrid drives with the ease of someone who has navigated these roads in all conditions, and she talks as she drives, telling me about the area, about the communities that dot this vast territory, about the ways people have learned to live with the darkness and the cold. In the old days, she says, people here would gather together during the darkest months. They would tell stories, play music, do handwork together. It was a way of keeping the darkness from becoming loneliness. Some people still do this, though now we also have the internet and television. She laughs softly. But I think there is something important about the old ways, about sitting together in lamplight and sharing the warmth of presence. I think about this as we drive, about the difference between the electric light of screens and the warm glow of oil lamps or candles, about how certain technologies can connect us across distances while others root us more deeply in our immediate surroundings. The Inanga in my pack feels like it belongs to this second category, an instrument that demands physical presence, that creates intimacy through its quiet voice. We turn off the main road onto a smaller track, barely wide enough for the car, that leads deeper into the forest. The trees press close on either side, their branches creating a tunnel of snow and shadow. After a few minutes, we emerge into a clearing, and there is the cabin, a traditional Norwegian hytte built of dark wood that has weathered to a silvered gray, with a steep roof to shed the heavy snow and small windows that glow with unexpected warmth. I came this morning to start the fire and bring in fresh supplies, Astrid explains as we get out of the car. The cabin is simple, but it has everything you need. Come, let me show you. The cabin is small, essentially 3 rooms and a loft, but it has been arranged with such care that it feels spacious rather than cramped. The main room serves as both kitchen and living area, with a wood stove in one corner, radiating heat, a table and chairs near the window, shelves lined with books and oil lamps, and a comfortable chair positioned to face the stove. The bedroom is just large enough for a bed and a small dresser, and the bathroom, while compact, has running water and even a small bathtub. The water comes from a spring up the hill, Astrid tells me. It is very pure and very cold, but the water heater works well. There is a generator for electricity if you need it, but I find most people who come here prefer the lamps. There is something about that softer light that suits this place. She shows me how to feed the wood stove, how to adjust the damper to control the heat, where the supply of split logs is kept in the shed outside. She points out the emergency supplies, extra blankets, candles, matches, a radio that can receive weather reports. She gives me her phone number and the numbers of her nearest neighbors, though the nearest is still several kilometers away. You are truly alone here, she says, but not dangerously so. If you need anything, we can reach you, and the solitude. It is a gift, I think, especially now, in winter, when the world slows down and you can hear yourself think. After Astrid leaves, after I hear her car engine fade into the distance, I stand in the center of the main room and simply breathe. The silence here is different from the silence at the train station. It is an indoor silence, contained and sheltered, punctuated by the crackling of the fire and the small settling sounds of a building adjusting to temperature changes. I can smell the wood smoke, the faint mineral scent of cold air seeping in around the windows, the slight mustiness of a place that has been closed up and is now being lived in again. I unpack slowly, taking my time with each item, giving myself the luxury of deliberate movement. I hang my coat on the hook by the door, line up my boots on the mat where they can dry. I carry my backpack to the bedroom and lay out my clothes in the dresser, sweaters and thermal layers, thick socks, the kind of practical clothing that prioritizes warmth over style. And then I unwrap the Inanga, carefully removing the layers of cloth until the instrument lies revealed in my hands. It is beautiful in its simplicity, a wooden trough, perhaps 2 feet long, strung with 8 metal strings that catch the lamplight. The wood is dark and smooth, worn by countless hands before mine, and when I run my finger along its length, I can feel the slight ridges of grain, the places where the wood remembers the tree it once was. The musician in Oslo had told me that the Inanga originated in Rwanda, that it was traditionally played by men for the royal court, that its music was meant to accompany poetry and storytelling. He had taught me a few basic patterns, but mostly he had encouraged me to explore, to find my own relationship with the instrument. I bring it into the main room and sit in the chair by the stove, the Inanga balance on my lap. I pluck one string experimentally, and the sound that emerges is soft and resonant with overtones that seem to hang in the air long after the initial note has faded. I try another string, then another, not attempting to make music yet, just listening to the voice of the instrument, learning how it responds to touch. Outside, through the window, I can see the forest darkening as what little daylight there was continues to fade. The snow on the ground seems to hold light, creating a subtle luminescence that makes the trees stand out as dark silhouettes. I watch as the blue of the sky deepens to purple, then to black, and stars begin to appear. More stars than I have ever seen, so many that they seem to merge into rivers of light, the Milky Way, a clear band across the heavens. I set the Inanga aside and prepare a simple dinner. Soup from a can heated on the stove, bread that Astrid left in the kitchen, cheese and apples. I eat slowly, sitting at the table with a single oil lamp providing light, watching the shadows dance on the walls. The warmth of the soup spreads through me, and I become aware of the contrast, the cold that presses against the windows and walls, trying to find its way in, and the circle of warmth created by the stove and the lamp and my own body heat. It is like being in a bubble, a small sphere of comfort, floating in an ocean of cold. After dinner, I wash the dishes in the kitchen sink, the hot water steaming in the cool air. I dry them and put them away, maintaining the order that Astrid established, respecting the rhythms of this space. Then I return to the chair by the stove and pick up the Inanga again. This time, I begin to play more intentionally, trying to remember the patterns the musician showed me. My fingers are clumsy at first, unused to the spacing of the strings and the amount of pressure needed to produce a clear tone. But gradually, as a fire burns and the night deepens outside, I begin to find a rhythm. The sound of the Inanga fills the cabin, mixing with the crackle of the fire and the occasional groan of wood settling. It is not quite music and not quite noise, something in between, something that creates texture and atmosphere rather than melody. I close my eyes and let my fingers move across the strings, not thinking about what I am playing, just feeling the vibrations travel up through my hands and arms, resonating in my chest. The instrument has a way of slowing time, of pulling attention into the present moment. Each note requires focus, not intense concentration, but a gentle awareness, a listening quality that extends beyond just the ears. I am not sure how long I play. Time moves differently here, just as Astrid said. The watch on my wrist becomes irrelevant when there is no schedule to keep, no appointments to rush to. The only rhythms that matter are the rhythm of the fire needing more wood, the rhythm of my own tiredness signaling the need for sleep, the ancient rhythm of day and night that, even this far north where they blend into each other, still exerts its subtle pull. Eventually, my fingers grow tired, and I set the Inanga aside. I add more wood to the stove, adjusting the damper so it will burn slowly through the night, maintaining just enough heat to keep the cabin comfortable. I fill a hot water bottle from the kettle I've kept warm on the stove, another of Astrid's thoughtful preparations, and carry it to the bedroom. The bedroom is cold, the heat from the stove not quite reaching this far, and I change quickly into my thermal pajamas, wool socks, and a knit cap. The bed has a thick duvet and several blankets, and when I slip between the sheets with the hot water bottle, I create an instant cocoon of warmth. I can hear the wind beginning to pick up outside, rattling the shutters slightly, and the sound is oddly comforting, a reminder of the shelter I am in, the protection these walls provide. I lie in the darkness, too tired to read, to awake to sleep immediately. My body is adjusting to the journey, to the change in altitude and temperature, to the profound quiet. I think about what brought me here, the need to step away from the constant noise and stimulation of city life, the desire to understand what it might mean to slow down, to live at a different pace. I think about the Inanga and why I felt compelled to bring it with me. This instrument from one distant place carried to another, a bridge between two kinds of remoteness. As I begin to drift toward sleep, I become aware of a sound outside, faint and distant, but unmistakable. It is a sound of wolves howling, their voices carrying across the frozen landscape, speaking to each other in a language older than human words. The sound should perhaps frighten me, alone as I am in this small cabin, but instead it completes something, fills in a piece of the picture I am painting in my mind of this place. The wolves are out there in the cold and the darkness, perfectly adapted to their environment, part of the intricate web of life that continues regardless of human presence. I pull the blankets closer and let the sound of their howling carry me into sleep. I wake to a world transformed. During the night, new snow has fallen, and everything outside the window is fresh and unmarked. The sky is clear, that same deep blue I saw yesterday, and the sun, or what passes for the sun here, is a pale disk just barely visible above the southern horizon, casting long shadows across the snow. The light it provides is more suggestion than illumination, a reminder of what sunlight is, rather than actual daylight. Inside the cabin, the temperature has dropped overnight despite the stove, and my breath makes small clouds in the air when I sit up. I dress quickly, pulling on layers, and hurry to the main room to revive the fire. The coals are still glowing beneath the ash, and I carefully add small pieces of kindling, then larger logs, coaxing the flames back to life. Soon the stove is crackling again, and I hold my hands out to its warmth, feeling the cold slowly retreat from my fingers. I make coffee using the percolator on the stove, and while it brews, I stand at the window and watch the day begin its brief arc. A raven lands on a fence post near the cabin, its black feathers glossy against the snow. It cocks its head, studying the cabin with one bright eye, then opens its beak and utters a call that sounds almost like speech, a rolling, throaty sound that seems to contain more meaning than a simple bird call should. After a moment, it spreads its wings and launches itself into the air, flying toward the forest with strong, measured wing beats. The coffee is strong and bitter, and I drink it mixed with hot milk and a spoonful of honey, standing by the window, watching as a slight wind picks up snow from the ground and sends it swirling through the air in delicate spirals. It is mesmerizing the way the snow moves, creating momentary patterns that dissolve and reform, never the same twice. I think about how this is what the landscape does here. It shifts and changes while appearing static, the snow drifting into new configurations, the ice forming and melting and reforming, everything in constant subtle motion. After breakfast, porridge with dried fruit and nuts, more coffee, I dress in my outdoor clothes and step outside for the first time since arriving. The cold is shocking, even though I expected it. A physical force that makes my eyes water and my nose tingle. I stand on the small porch and breathe deeply, taking the cold air into my lungs, feeling it wake something in me that the warmth of indoor life had put to sleep. I walk around the cabin, getting a sense of the property in daylight. There is the shed where the firewood is stored, neatly stacked and covered with a tarp. There is a small outhouse, thankfully unnecessary given the indoor plumbing, but maintained as a backup. There is what might be a garden in summer, now just a rectangle of snow slightly raised above the surrounding ground. And beyond all this, there is the forest, pressing close, the trees standing in their patient rows, waiting. I walk to the edge of the clearing and stand among the first trees. The forest here is different from forests I have known. There is a severity to it, a sense that it exists on its own terms and tolerates human presence rather than welcoming it. The trees are mostly pine and spruce, their needles dark and their branches heavy. The snow beneath them is not as deep as in the clearing, caught by the canopy above, and I can see tracks, small paw prints that might be fox or hare, larger prints that could be elk or even moose. I do not venture far into the forest. There will be time for that later, time to learn the paths and landmarks, to understand the shape of this place. For now, I am content to stand at the threshold, to acknowledge that the forest is here, that it forms the boundary of my small human space, that beyond it stretches miles and miles of wilderness where I would quickly become lost without knowledge and preparation. When I return to the cabin, my cheeks are burning with cold, my fingers numb despite my gloves. I am grateful beyond measure for the warmth of the stove, for the shelter of these walls. I make more tea and sit in my chair with a blanket wrapped around my legs, letting my body temperature slowly return to normal. And then, without quite deciding to, I pick up the Inanga and begin to play. The pattern I find today is different from last night, slower, more deliberate. I let each note ring out fully before plucking the next, creating a kind of meditation in sound. The resonance of the wooden body seems to match something in the cabin cabin itself, as if the two pieces of wood, the instrument and the building, are having a conversation, recognizing each other as kin. I think about what the musician in Oslo said about how the Inanga is made from a single piece of wood, hollowed out and shaped, its strings stretched across the cavity to capture and amplify the wood's natural resonance. I think about the forests outside, about the trees that grow here so slowly, adding just a thin ring of growth each year, their wood dense and strong from the short growing season. I think about how some of those trees might have been harvested to build this cabin, how they were transformed from vertical to horizontal, from living forest to sheltering walls, but how they still carry within them the memory of wind and snow and long winters. The Inanga too remembers. It remembers the forest where its tree grew, the hands that shaped it, all the music that has been played on it before I ever touched its strings. As I play, I watch through the window as the light outside slowly changes. It is subtle, the blue deepening slightly, the shadows lengthening, but it is perceptible if you pay attention. The sun, if you can call it that, moves along the horizon rather than climbing overhead, a horizontal journey instead of a vertical one. It occurs to me that this is what the northern winter teaches, to value the subtle over the dramatic, to find beauty in restraint rather than abundance, to appreciate light not for its brightness, but for its mere presence. The day passes in a rhythm that I could not have maintained in my normal life. Small tasks intersperse with long periods of simply sitting, of watching, of being present. I bring in more firewood from the shed, stacking it neatly by the stove to dry. I sweep the floor, straightening what little there is to straighten. I read from one of the books on the shelf, a collection of Norwegian folk tales that someone has thoughtfully provided in English translation, letting the stories of trolls and hidden folk and the spirits that inhabit the wilderness seep into my imagination. I make soup for lunch using vegetables and broth that Astrid provided, letting it simmer on the stove until the cabin is filled with a savory aroma. I eat slowly, really tasting the food, noticing how my hunger sharpens the flavors, how the warmth of the soup spreads through my body and makes me drowsy and content. After lunch, I lie on the bed for what I intend to be a brief rest, and instead fall into a deep, dreamless sleep, waking hours later to find the cabin in darkness, except for the faint glow from the stove. I light the oil lamps, their soft yellow light pushing back the darkness, creating pools of visibility that make the cabin feel even more like a refuge. I consider making dinner, but find I am not particularly hungry. So instead, I eat an apple and some cheese, standing at the window and watching the night. And then I see them. At first, I think it is my imagination or a trick of the lamplight reflecting off the window. But no, there, in the northern sky, a curtain of green light is beginning to form. It starts as a faint glow, barely distinguishable from the stars, but it grows stronger, more defined, beginning to move and pulse. The aurora borealis, the northern lights. I have seen photographs, of course, have watched videos online, but nothing has prepared me for the reality of it, for the way the light seems to dance, to breathe, to flow across the sky like water or silk or some substance that exists only in this moment. The green is not uniform, but shaded, pale jade to deep emerald, with occasional hints of pink and purple at the edges. It forms arcs and rays, curtains and spirals, constantly shifting, never still. I grab my coat and rush outside, not bothering with all my layers, driven by the urgency to see this without the barrier of glass between us. The cold hits me like a slap, but I barely notice it. I am transfixed by the light, by its silent, majestic performance in the darkness above. I stand in the snow, my head tilted back, watching the aurora ripple and flow. There is no sound to it, despite legends about the lights making noise. I hear only the silence of the winter night, the occasional crack of ice, the whisper of wind. But the lights seem to demand sound, to call out for accompaniment, and without thinking about it, I find myself humming, trying to match my voice to the movement I see, rising and falling, wavering and pulsing. After a few minutes, the cold becomes unbearable, and I rush back inside, my teeth chattering, but I cannot look away from the lights, so I wrap myself in the blanket and stand at the window, watching as the aurora continues its display. And now, perhaps foolishly, perhaps brilliantly, I pick up the inanga. I begin to play, my fingers stiff from the cold, but gradually warming, and I try to translate what I am seeing into sound. When the lights pulse, I pluck the strings in rhythm. When they flow in long, graceful arcs, I drag my fingers across multiple strings, creating a wash of sound. When they fade to almost nothing before surging back to brightness, I let the notes die away to silence before beginning again. It is impossible, of course. You cannot capture something so vast and cosmic in the small sounds of a wooden instrument, but the attempt itself feels important, feels like a kind of prayer or offering, an acknowledgement of the beauty and mystery unfolding in the sky. I play until my fingers ache, until the lights begin to fade, withdrawing back to wherever they come from, leaving only the stars in their familiar fixed patterns. When it is over, I sit in the silence for a long time, the inanga still in my lap. I feel something I cannot quite name, not happiness exactly, though there is joy in it, but something more like completeness, as if I have witnessed something essential and true about the universe and my small place in it. That night, I sleep deeply again, and if I dream, I do not remember it. When I wake in the morning, I wonder if the aurora was real, or if my tired mind created it from longing and lamplight. But then I see the tracks I left in the snow when I rushed outside, and I know it happened, that I was witness to one of the earth's great wonders. The days begin to establish a pattern, though it is a loose and flexible one, more a rhythm than a schedule. I wake when light begins to seep into the sky, what passes for morning in this land of extended twilight. I tend the fire, make coffee, eat a simple breakfast. Then I might read or play the inanga, or simply sit and watch as the subtle drama of light and shadow plays out across the landscape. Some days I walk, bundling up against the cold and venturing out into the surrounding area. I learn the paths that wind through the forest, following tracks left by animals. I discover a frozen stream, its surface a confusion of ice formations where water moving beneath has forced its way up, creating sculptures of impossible beauty. I find a clearing where someone has stacked stones in a cairn, a marker whose meaning I do not know, but whose presence feels important. A human mark on the wilderness. On one of these walks, I encounter a herd of reindeer. They appear suddenly from behind a ridge, moving across the snow with their distinctive gait, their antlers shoulders like bare tree branches against the sky. They stop when they see me, and we regard each other across the distance, they with wariness but not fear, me with awe and respect. After a moment, they continue their journey, disappearing over the next rise, and I am left with the gift of their presence, the reminder that I am a guest in their world. I begin to understand something about the cold. At first, it seems like an enemy, something to be defended against and endured, but gradually, I come to see it as simply a condition, a fact, like gravity or wind. You cannot fight the cold. You can only dress for it, respect it, work with it, and in working with it, you become more aware of warmth, not just physical warmth, but emotional warmth, the warmth of memory and imagination, the warmth of small comforts like hot tea or a crackling fire. The Inanga becomes my companion, my way of marking time and mood. I play it every day, usually in the evening as the darkness gathers, but sometimes in the morning or afternoon as well. I am not improving in any conventional sense. I am not learning songs or developing technique. Instead, I am learning the instrument's language, the way it responds to different touches, the patterns of overtones that emerge when you pluck strings in certain combinations. I discover that the instrument is particularly responsive to the acoustic properties of the cabin. Sitting in one spot, the sound is warm and enclosed. Moving to another, it becomes brighter and more resonant. Near the window, there is a subtle echo, as if the frozen landscape outside is reflecting the sound back. I experiment with these different spaces, learning the geography of sound within these small rooms. One afternoon, as I am playing, I notice something odd. I have been creating a repetitive pattern, a loop of notes that cycle every few seconds, and I am watching the light outside, the way it falls across the snow in bars created by the fence posts, and it seems, though it must be my imagination, that the light is moving in time with the music, that each pulse of sound corresponds to a flicker of brightness, each pause to a shadow. I stop playing, and the illusion vanishes. The light is simply light, moving as it always does with the slow arc of the sun. But when I begin the pattern again, there it is, the sense of synchronization, of the sound controlling the light, or the light controlling the sound. It is hypnotic, and I find myself falling into a kind of trance. My fingers moving automatically, my mind drifting in that space between waking and sleeping, where thoughts become fluid and boundaries blur. When I finally stop, I feel disoriented, as if I have been gone somewhere and returned. I look at my watch and am surprised to find that hours have passed, though it feels like only minutes. The cabin has grown cold. The fire burned down to coals, and I have to rebuild it from scratch, carefully adding kindling and blowing gently to coax the flames back to life. This experience marks a shift in my relationship with the instrument and with the cabin itself. I begin to feel that I am not simply staying in this place, but entering into some kind of dialogue with it, that the playing of the Inanga is a way of listening as much as making sound. I start to hear things I did not notice before, the different tones the fire makes as it burns different types of wood, the way the wind creates harmonics as it moves through the eaves of the cabin, the resonance that occurs when the temperature drops rapidly and the wood contracts with small popping sounds. I also begin to notice changes in my own body adaptations to this environment and lifestyle. I am sleeping more deeply than I have in years, my body naturally aligning with the rhythm of darkness and light. I am hungry in a clean, uncomplicated way. My meals simple but deeply satisfying. My hands, despite the cold, are becoming more flexible, more sensitive to subtle textures and temperatures, and my mind, freed from its usual bombardment of stimuli, is producing thoughts that are slower but somehow more complete. Ideas that arrive fully formed rather than fragmentary. One morning, I wake to find that another snowfall has occurred during the night, this one heavy enough to partially block the door. I have to push hard to open it, and snow tumbles into the cabin in a small avalanche. I laugh at this, my first spontaneous laughter since arriving, and set about clearing a path, shoveling the snow away from the door and the path to the woodshed. The physical work is hard, and I am quickly breathing heavily, my breath creating clouds in the cold air. But there is something satisfying about it, about the simple cause and effect of shovel meeting snow, about transforming an obstacle into a clear path. By the time I finish, I am warm despite the cold, my muscles pleasantly tired, and the cabin sits in its clearing like a ship on a white sea, maintained and defended by my effort. That evening, as I am preparing dinner, a stew made from preserved vegetables and dried meat, rich and warming, I hear a sound outside. At first, I think it might be the wind or an animal, but then I realize it is more regular than that, almost rhythmic. I go to the window and see in the distance a light moving through the trees. I am not afraid exactly, but I am alert, aware suddenly of how isolated I am, how far from any help. But as the light draws closer, I make out a figure on skis, pulling a small sled. They call out something in Norwegian, a greeting probably, and I go to the door and call back, hoping my tone conveys welcome, even if the words are not understood. It is a man, perhaps in his 60s, with a weathered face and kind eyes visible between his hat and scarf. He plants his ski poles and speaks in Norwegian, then seeing my confusion, switches to English. I am Henrik, he says. I live about 5 kilometers that way. He gestures vaguely over his shoulder. Astrid told me you were here. I wanted to check that you are well, that you have everything you need. I'm fine, I say, touched by this concern, by the effort it must have taken to ski here in the cold and darkness. Please, come in, warm yourself. He stomps the snow from his skis and props them against the cabin, then enters, bringing with him a gust of cold air and the smell of pine and snow. He removes his outer layers, revealing more layers beneath, and accepts the tea I offer with gratitude. You are lucky with the weather, he says, wrapping his hands around the cup. It has been mild for this time of year. Last year, we had a cold snap that lasted 3 weeks. Temperatures below -30, too cold to be outside for more than a few minutes. We talk for a while, and I learn that Henrik is a retired fisherman who now spends his time carving wood, figures of animals and birds that he sells to tourists in the summer. He lives alone since his wife died 2 years ago, but he has children and grandchildren who visit regularly, and he is active in the small community that maintains a presence in this remote area. He notices the Inanga sitting by my chair and asks about it. I explain its origin, my clumsy attempts to learn it, and he nods thoughtfully. Music is good in in winter, he says. It fills the silence in a way that is company without being demanding. I used to play the accordion, but my fingers are too stiff now. He flexes them demonstratively, but I still whistle. Old songs that my father taught me, that his father taught him. Songs about the sea and the mountains, about love and loss and the turning of the seasons. Before he leaves, he brings in the sled, which I see is loaded with fresh fish, already cleaned and frozen. From my freezer, he explains, it is too much for one person, and fish should be eaten and enjoyed, not just stored. Take these, cook them, think of the sea when you eat them. I try to thank him, but he waves away my gratitude. We help each other here. That is how we survive. Then with a smile, and Astrid would scold me if I did not check on you. She takes her responsibilities seriously. After he leaves, after I watch his light disappear back into the forest, I feel a warmth that has nothing to do with the fire. The loneliness I did not realize I was feeling dissipates slightly, replaced by the knowledge that I am not as isolated as I thought, that there are people out there in the darkness who are aware of my presence, who care about my well-being. I cook one of the fish that night, pan-frying it simply with butter and salt, and it is delicious, firm and sweet, tasting of cold, clean water. I eat it with potatoes and preserved vegetables, and I think about Henrik's words, about thinking of the sea. Though I cannot see the ocean from here, though it is many kilometers away, I can imagine it through the taste of this fish, the vast, dark waters, the currents and tides, the life that teems beneath the surface. The days continue their slow procession. I fall deeper into the rhythm of this place, my internal clock adjusting to the abbreviated daylight and extended darkness. I find that I am most alert in what would normally be evening, my mind clear and focused as the night settles in. I do most of my reading and writing during these hours, the oil lamp creating a circle of light that feels both intimate and infinite. I have started keeping a journal, not of events. There are so few of those, but of observations and thoughts. I write about the quality of different kinds of silence, about the way snow changes appearance depending on temperature and wind, about the architecture of ice crystals on the window glass. I write about memory and how it works differently here, where there are so few external prompts, without the constant input of new information. Old memories surface more readily, and I find myself thinking about my childhood, about relationships long ended, about choices made and roads not taken. The Inanga continues to be my tool for exploration, but now I am exploring internal landscapes as much as creating sound. I have discovered that certain patterns of notes evoke specific emotional states or memories. A particular combination of the lower strings brings up a memory of sitting in my grandmother's kitchen while she cooked, the sound somehow capturing the feeling of that time and place. A rapid alternation of the higher strings creates a sensation of excitement or anticipation, an energy that contrasts with the general slowness of my days. I begin to think of the instrument as a kind of key, a way of accessing parts of myself that are usually locked away. It is not that I am trying to achieve anything specific. I am not composing or performing. Rather, I am using the act of playing as a form of meditation, a way of being present with whatever arises. One night, the aurora returns, even more spectacular than before. The entire entire sky seems to be alive with light, not just the usual green, but reds and purples and blues, colors that pulse and flow in patterns that seem almost intelligent, as if the aurora is trying to communicate something. I stand outside as long as I can bear the cold, then retreat inside and play the inanga while watching through the window, trying once again to translate the visual into the auditory. I think about what causes the aurora: charged particles from the sun interacting with the Earth's magnetic field, a purely physical process that creates this ethereal beauty. There is something profound in that, in the way the most basic forces of the universe can produce something that moves the human heart. It is a reminder that beauty is not separate from the physical world, but emerges from it, that the material and the spiritual are not opposites, but different aspects of the same reality. As I play, I feel a sensation of weight, not oppressive, but grounding. It is as if my body is becoming heavier, more substantial, more connected to the earth beneath the cabin. I think about the mountains I glimpsed on my journey here, those massive granite formations that have existed for millions of years, that will exist for millions more. I imagine myself as similar, solid, unmoving, patient. My shoulders feel like stone, my spine like a standing boulder. The sensation is deeply relaxing, and when I finally set aside the inanga and prepare for bed, I move slowly, carefully, as if I am indeed made of something heavier than flesh and bone. That night, I dream of mountains. I am standing on a peak, wind whipping around me, looking out over an endless expanse of rock and ice and sky. There are no other humans in the dream, no animals, just the raw geology of the earth, the fundamental architecture of the planet, and I am part of it, as permanent and temporary as any stone, shaped by forces beyond my control, existing in a moment that is both infinitesimal and eternal. When I wake, the dream lingers, and I carry its feeling through the day. I move more slowly than usual, more deliberately. I sit for long periods without feeling the need to do anything, content simply to be present. I watch the light change outside, the subtle shift from the blue of pre-dawn to the slightly lighter blue of midday to the deeper blue of afternoon. I notice how the snow catches and reflects what little light there is, how it creates a luminosity that seems to come from within rather than from above. In the afternoon, I make bread, following a simple recipe I found in the cabin. I mix flour and water and salt and yeast, kneading the dough until it becomes smooth and elastic. The physical work is satisfying. The transformation of separate ingredients into something unified and alive with potential. I set the dough to rise near the stove, covering it with a damp cloth. And while I wait, I play the inanga. The patterns I create today are slow and spacious, with long pauses between notes. I am not thinking about the aurora or trying to capture any external phenomenon. Instead, I am simply following my intuition, plucking strings when it feels right to do so, allowing silence when that feels right instead. The music, if you can call it that, has the quality of breath. Inhale and exhale, sound and silence, tension and release. When the bread is ready, I shape it into a loaf and bake it in the oven that is part of the wood stove. The cabin fills with the smell of baking bread, a smell so primal and comforting, it nearly brings tears to my eyes. I think about all the humans who have baked bread over all the centuries, about how this simple act connects me to countless others across time and space. When the bread is done, I let it cool slightly and then tear off a piece, butter it while it's still warm, and eat it standing by the window. It is possibly the best bread I have ever tasted, not because of any special skill on my part, but because I am present to it, because I have participated in its creation, because it is exactly what this moment calls for. I lose track of the days without the usual markers, work schedules, appointments, social obligations. One day flows into another. I know approximately how long I have been here because I count the fish I cook, the loaves of bread I bake, the times I have refilled the oil lamps. But the specific day of the week becomes meaningless. Is it Tuesday or Friday? I have no idea, and it does not matter. What does matter is the quality of each moment, the texture of each experience. I am learning to pay attention in a way I never have before, to notice things that would normally pass beneath my awareness. The different sounds the fire makes as it consumes different types of wood. Pine burning quickly with a cheery crackle, birch burning slower and hotter with a steadier sound. The way my breath condenses when I step outside, creating a small cloud that dissipates quickly in the dry air, the patterns that frost makes on the windows, delicate ferns and flowers, and abstract geometries that are never quite the same twice. I am also becoming aware of time in a different way, not clock time with its precise measurements and relentless forward motion, but something more cyclical and organic. The rhythm of day and night, though abbreviated here, still exists. The cycle of the fire, building, burning, dying down to coals, being rebuilt. The cycle of my own energy, waking, activity, rest, sleep. These cycles nest within each other, creating a kind of temporal harmony that is deeply satisfying. One day, or perhaps it is night, the distinction becoming less clear, I experience something unusual. I am playing the Inanga, lost in the repetitive pattern I have created, when I suddenly have the sensation of depth, as if I am looking down into water, but I'm not looking at anything external. This is an internal sensation, a feeling of vast space opening up inside me. It is not frightening, but it is disorienting, and I stop playing, trying to understand what is happening. I close my eyes and let myself sink into the sensation. It is like diving, like descending into deep water, except there is no water, only this feeling of depth and darkness and quiet. I am reminded of something Henrik said about the fjords being incredibly deep, some of them over 1,000 meters. I imagine sinking down through such water, watching the light fade as I descend, feeling the pressure increase, entering realms where most life cannot exist. But instead of being frightening, it is peaceful. The depth is not empty but full of potential, of rest, of a kind of existence that does not require constant doing and striving. I let myself sink deeper, and as I do, my body begins to relax in a way I have never experienced. My muscles release tensions I did not know they were holding. My breath slows, deepens, becomes almost imperceptible. My mind, usually so busy with thoughts and plans and worries, becomes still. I do not know how long I remain in this state. When I eventually open my eyes, the oil lamp is burning low, nearly out of fuel. I am sitting in the chair by the stove, the Inanga still in my lap, and I feel different, lighter somehow, even though earlier I felt heavy like stone. It is as if I have been to some other place and returned cleansed, renewed. I stand carefully, my body moving with an ease that surprises me. I refill the oil lamp, add wood to the stove, and then I look out the window into the darkness, and there, reflected in the glass, I see my own face, but it is a face I barely recognize. The worry lines that usually mark my forehead are smooth. My eyes, instead of their usual tension, are soft and calm. I look like someone who has been sleeping peacefully for days, who has laid down some burden I did not realize I was carrying. I touch my reflection, my fingers meeting the cold glass, and I smile. The person looking back smiles too, and it is genuine, unforced, a smile of simple contentment. That night, I write in my journal, I came here to escape something, but I'm discovering that escape is not the point. The point is to arrive fully in the present moment, in this body, in this life. The Inanga is teaching me this, or perhaps it is the silence teaching me, and the Inanga is just the medium through which the lesson comes. Either way, I am learning. Henrik visits again, this time bringing fresh venison that a hunter friend gave him. We cook it together, pan-frying medallions with butter and wild herbs that Henrik has preserved from summer. He is curious about my time here, asking questions about how I spend my days, whether I am lonely, what I have learned. I think, I say slowly, trying to articulate something I have only half understood myself. I am learning about shelter, not just physical shelter, though this cabin is certainly that, but also inner shelter. The way the Inanga creates a kind of sonic shelter, a space that feels safe and contained. The way silence can be sheltering when you stop being afraid of it. Henrik nods, his weathered face thoughtful. Yes, shelter is important. But you know, in the old days, people did not think of their homes as shelters from nature. They thought of them as places where they could be part of nature in a different way. The cold outside is not the enemy. It is just a different state. You dress for it, you respect it, and you can be in it safely. He tells me about winters when he was young, before modern heating and insulation, when homes were cold, even indoors, when people slept in many layers and woke to find frost on the inside of windows. We were tougher then, he says, though not in a boastful way, just as a statement of fact. Or maybe we just expected less comfort. But there was something good about it too. You appreciated the warmth when you had it. Every fire was precious. After dinner, he asks if he can hear the Inanga. I am suddenly shy. I have been playing only for myself, and the idea of performing, even informally, makes me nervous. But I cannot refuse his genuine interest. So I pick up the instrument and begin to play, choosing one of the slower patterns I have developed, one that feels meditative and calm. Henrik listens with his eyes closed, his weathered hands resting on his knees. When I finish, he is quiet for a long moment, then opens his eyes and nods. That is good. It sounds like thinking, you know, like the sound that thoughts would make if they could be heard. I am struck by this description. He is right. The music I make with the Inanga does have a quality of internality, as if I am making my thought processes audible. It is less performance than externalized meditation. You should play it outside sometime, Henrik suggests. In the forest or by the frozen stream, sound behaves differently in the cold, especially on very still days. It carries differently. You might find it interesting. After he leaves, I think about this suggestion. I have been so focused on the cabin as a place of shelter that I have not fully explored how to exist in the cold. how to be part of the winter landscape rather than just protected from it. The next day, I decide to try Henrik's suggestion. I bundle up in all my layers: thermal underwear, sweater, down jacket, insulated pants, boots, hat, scarf, gloves. I carefully wrap the Inanga in a blanket to protect it from the cold, and I walk out into the forest. Following the path I have learned leads to the frozen stream. The day is clear and utterly still. Not even a breath of wind disturbs the air. The cold is intense, probably 20 below zero, and I can feel it trying to find its way through my layers. But I am warm enough, and there is something exhilarating about being out in this, about proving to myself that I can exist in these conditions. When I reach the stream, I find a fallen log that has been swept clear of snow, and I sit on it, my back against a large boulder. I remove my outer gloves, leaving only the thin liner gloves, and I unwrap the Inanga. The wood of the instrument is cold to the touch, and I am briefly worried that the strings might be affected by the temperature, but they seem fine, tuned, and ready. I begin to play, and immediately I hear what Henrik meant. The sound behaves completely differently here. In the cabin, the notes are warm and contained, held by the walls and amplified by the enclosed space. Here, the sound seems to expand outward, traveling in all directions at once, dissipating into the vast openness of the forest. It is like playing into infinity, each note a small offering to the immensity of the landscape. But there is also something else. After each note, after the sound has faded into the distance, there is a quality of silence that is different from indoor silence. It is not empty, but expectant, as if the forest is listening, as if the trees and the snow and the frozen stream are paying attention to what I'm doing. I play for perhaps 10 minutes, my fingers gradually losing feeling despite the gloves. The patterns I create are simple, just a few notes repeated in different combinations, allowing long stretches of silence between them. And in those silences, I become aware of the forest's own sounds, the occasional crack of a tree branch contracting in the cold, the soft thump of snow falling from a laden branch, a distant bird call that sounds impossibly clear in the frozen air. When I stop playing, when I sit in silence with the Inanga in my lap, I experience a moment of profound connection. I am not separate from this place. I am part of it, participating in its existence, contributing my small sounds to its vast symphony. The cold, which I have been thinking of as something to defend against, is actually binding me more tightly to this environment, forcing me to be fully present, to pay attention, to respect the power of the natural world. My fingers are too cold to continue, so I carefully wrap the Inanga and make my way back to the cabin. The walk warms me, blood returning to my extremities with a tingling sensation that is almost painful. When I enter the cabin, the warmth feels like an embrace, and I am grateful for it in a way that goes beyond simple physical comfort. I make tea and sit by the stove, holding the cup with both hands, letting the heat seep into my cold fingers, and I think about what just happened, about the experience of playing outside. It occurs to me that the distinction I have been making between inside and outside, between shelter and exposure, is perhaps not as absolute as I thought. They are not opposites, but different expressions of the same fundamental relationship with the environment. Time continues its strange, elastic quality. days might be passing quickly or slowly. I cannot tell which. What I can tell is that I am changing, adapting to this place and this way of living. My body has adjusted to the cold. I need fewer layers than I did at first. My sleep is deep and restorative, untroubled by dreams or restlessness. My appetite is healthy, but not excessive. My body taking what it needs and no more. And the Inanga has become an extension of myself, as natural as speaking or breathing. I no longer think about playing it. I simply do it, my fingers finding patterns without conscious direction. Sometimes I wonder if I am playing the instrument or if it is playing me, using my hands as a medium for sounds it wants to make. One evening, as I am playing and watching the stars through the window, they are particularly bright tonight. The Milky Way, a river of light across the black sky. I have a sudden realization. The patterns I am creating with the Inanga are not random. They are not conscious compositions, but they are not random either. They are reflections of my internal state, of the rhythms of my body and mind, of the deep processes that govern life itself. The heartbeat rhythm that sometimes emerges, that is literally my heart. Its pulse transmitted through my fingers into the strings. The breathing pattern, the slow inhale and exhale of sound and silence. That is my lungs, my body's fundamental relationship with air. Even the more complex patterns, with their variations and returns, their moments of tension and resolution, those are reflections of the brain's activity, the constant process of thought and feeling and perception that makes up consciousness. The Inanga, I realize, is not creating something new, but making visible, audible what is already there. It is like a microscope or a telescope, a tool for revealing realities that exist but are normally hidden from awareness. Through it, I am hearing myself, not my thoughts or emotions in any direct sense, but the deeper patterns that underlie those surface phenomena, the fundamental rhythms of being alive. This realization is both humbling and empowering. I am not special or unique. Everyone's body operates according to these same basic rhythms, but at the same time, no one else's patterns are exactly like mine. We are all playing variations on universal themes, each of us a unique expression of the same basic life force. I think about Henrik's words, about the sound of thinking. He was right, but it is even more than that. It is the sound of being, of existing as a conscious organism in a physical body in a particular moment of time. And by making this audible, by paying attention to it, I am participating more fully in my own life, becoming more aware of what it means to be alive. That night, I do not write in my journal. Instead, I sit in silence, listening to the sounds of the cabin, the fire, the wind, the small creaks and groans of wood adjusting to temperature changes. And beneath all of that, I listen to myself, to my breath, my heartbeat, the subtle sounds my body makes as it performs its constant maintenance and repair. It is like the Inanga has tuned my ears to a frequency I was previously deaf to, has opened up a new channel of perception. I fall asleep in the chair by the stove, the blanket wrapped around me, and I sleep dreamlessly, deeply, my body completely relaxed, my mind completely quiet. When I wake in the early hours of morning, the fire has burned down to coals, the cabin is cold, and the stars are still bright outside. I rebuild the fire and watch as it catches, as the flames grow and begin to warm the space, and I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not for anything in particular, just for this, for being here, for being alive, for having the privilege of witnessing another sunrise in this extraordinary place. The aurora returns more frequently now, or perhaps I am simply paying more attention, learning to recognize the conditions that favor its appearance. The clear, cold nights, the particular quality of stillness. Sometimes it is faint, just a hint of green on the northern horizon. Other times it is spectacular, filling the entire sky with dancing curtains of light. I have stopped rushing outside every time I see it. Instead, I watch from the window, the Inanga in my lap, playing quietly as the lights perform their silent dance. It has become a kind of ritual, this combination of visual and auditory, of watching and listening, of being present to the beauty of the natural world, while simultaneously creating my own small contribution to it. One night, the aurora is particularly active, the lights moving in rapid pulsing waves across the sky. I find myself matching the Inanga to this rhythm, my fingers moving faster than usual, creating patterns that rise and fall with the lights. And then something unexpected happens. I become aware of my own breath, of how it is synchronized with the music and the lights, of how my entire body is participating in this experience. My heartbeat seems to align with the pulse of the aurora. My breathing matches the rhythm of the notes. Even my blinking, the automatic flutter of eyelids, seems to be part of the pattern. I am not separate from what I am observing. I am part of it, connected to it, through invisible threads of resonance and harmony. The sensation is intense, almost overwhelming, and I have to stop playing, have to close my eyes and just breathe, grounding myself in the physical reality of the chair beneath me, the warmth of the stove, the solid walls of the cabin. When I open my eyes again, the aurora is still dancing, indifferent to my presence or absence, following its own cosmic choreography. But I am changed by the experience. I understand something now that I did not before, that the boundaries I assume exist between self and other, between inner and outer, between human and nature, these are less solid than they seem. We are all part of the same system, the same web of energy and matter, all connected in ways that are normally invisible, but can be glimpsed in moments of deep attention. This understanding should perhaps be frightening, the loss of the solid, separate self, but instead it is liberating. If I am not separate, then I am not alone. I am always and already connected to everything around me, supported by the same forces that hold the stars in their courses, animated by the same energy that powers the northern lights. I think about home, about the life I left behind to come here, the job with its deadlines and demands, the apartment with its noise and distractions, the relationships with their complexities and compromises. That life seems very far away now, almost like something that happened to someone else. And I wonder who I will be when I return to it, whether I can carry this understanding back with me, whether I can maintain this sense of connection in an environment that constantly reinforces separation. But these thoughts are for later. For now, I am here, and the aurora is dancing, and the Inanga is in my lap waiting to be played. I take a breath, center myself, and begin again. My fingers finding the strings, the notes rising into the air, participating in the ancient conversation between earth and sky. Astrid comes to visit, bringing fresh supplies and news from town. She is pleased to see me looking healthy, more relaxed than when I arrived. The North suits you, she says. Some people, they cannot handle the darkness and the cold. They become depressed or anxious. But others like you, they bloom in it. They discover that darkness is not the absence of light, but its own kind of presence. We make coffee and sit at the table, and she tells me about the community, who is getting married, whose child has won a school prize, the plans for the Midwinter Festival that will happen in a few weeks. It is all very ordinary, the kind of small town news that would seem boring anywhere else, but here feels like a lifeline, a reminder that beyond this cabin and this solitude, human life continues its endless, ordinary drama. Will you come to the festival? She asks. It would be good for you to meet more people, to be part of the community for an evening. I hesitate. Part of me wants to say no, to preserve the solitude I have built here, to avoid the complication of social interaction. But another part recognizes that isolation can become its own kind of trap, that balance requires movement between solitude and connection, between inner work and outer engagement. Yes, I say, I'll come. She smiles, pleased. Good. You can bring your instrument if you like. We always have music at the festival, traditional songs, but also anything people want to share. It would be interesting to hear something different. After she leaves, I think about this. The idea of playing the Inanga for other people is intimidating. It has been such a private thing, such a personal exploration. But perhaps there is value in sharing it, in seeing how it sounds in a different context, how others respond to it. I spend the next few days practicing, though I'm not sure what I am practicing for. I cannot really prepare to play the Inanga in the way you would prepare a piece of music. The whole point is the spontaneity, the response to the moment. But I can become more comfortable with the instrument, more confident in my ability to find patterns that feel right. I also begin to think about what I want to say with the music, if it can be said to say anything. What is the story I am telling with these patterns of sound? What do I want people to feel or understand when they hear it? And I realized that what I want to communicate is exactly what I have been experiencing here. The connection between things that seem separate. The way sound and light and breath and heartbeat are all part of the same fundamental rhythm. I want people to hear what I have heard, to feel that sense of being held by something larger than themselves, to experience, even for a moment, the dissolution of boundaries that separates us from the world. Whether I can actually accomplish this with a few plucked strings, I do not know, but the attempt itself feels worthwhile, feels like a natural extension of the work I have been doing here in solitude. The day of the festival arrives. I dress carefully, choosing my warmest layers, and I wrap the Inanga in its protective blanket. Henrik has offered to give me a ride, and when he arrives in his old truck, I am ready, standing on the porch with the instrument, feeling nervous and excited in equal measure. The drive to town takes about half an hour. Henrik chatters about his week. He has been carving a set of wooden birds for his granddaughter's birthday, each one detailed and perfect. He shows me photographs on his phone, and I am impressed by his skill, by the way he has captured not just the physical form of the birds, but something of their essential character, their particular way of being in the world. The festival is being held in the community center, a large wooden building that serves as a gathering place for the scattered population of the area. When we arrive, it is already full of people, families with children, elderly couples, young adults, everyone bundled in warm clothing, everyone bringing food or drink to share. Astrid greets me warmly and introduces me to others, names and faces that blur together in a confusion of welcome. Everyone is friendly but not intrusive, respecting the unspoken rule that if someone has been living in isolation, they might need space even in a crowd. The food is laid out on long tables, traditional dishes that I do not recognize, but that smell delicious, alongside more familiar things like bread and cheese and cured meats. There are thermoses of coffee and tea, jugs of juice for the children and for the adults who want it, bottles of aquavit, the traditional Norwegian spirit. I fill a plate and find a quiet corner where I can observe without feeling overwhelmed. The room is loud with conversation and laughter, with children running and playing, with the general chaos of community. It is a shock after so much silence, but not an unpleasant one. It reminds me that humans are social creatures, that we need this kind of connection, this feeling of belonging to something larger than ourselves. As the evening progresses, the eating gives way to other activities. Someone brings out an accordion and traditional songs are sung. First, the old ones that everyone knows, then more recent folk songs, then even some pop songs translated into Norwegian. The music is joyful and energetic, completely different from the quiet, meditative sounds I have been making with the Inanga, but no less valid, no less true to human experience. Eventually, Astrid finds me and asks if I would like to share my instrument. I am terrified, but I have come this far, so I agree. She quiets the room, introducing me briefly, explaining where I have come from and what I have been doing in the cabin. Then she turns to me and everyone is watching, and I unwrap the Inanga and hold it in my hands. For a moment, I am frozen, unable to begin. The room is too bright, too loud, even in its silence, too full of expectation. But then I close my eyes, and I remember the cabin, the stillness, the way the Inanga sounds when played in solitude, and I begin. The pattern I choose is one of the simplest, just a few notes repeated with long spaces between them. The sound is almost lost in the large room, but people lean forward to hear better, and gradually, a deep silence settles over the gathering. I play slowly, deliberately, not trying to impress or entertain, but simply offering what I have learned, sharing the quality of attention that the instrument demands. When I finish, there is a moment of silence and then applause, not loud or enthusiastic, but respectful, acknowledging. Several people come up afterward to ask about the instrument, to touch it gently, to try plucking a string. An elderly woman tells me it reminds her of a music box her grandmother had, the way the sound seems to come from some distant place, sometime outside of normal time. Henrik, when I find him later, is smiling. "You did well," he says. "You shared yourself without showing off. That is hard to do." As the evening winds down, as families begin to gather their children and prepare to leave, I feel a satisfaction that has nothing to do with whether people liked my playing. I have taken something private and made it public, and in doing so, I have completed some kind of circle. The solitude of the cabin was necessary. It gave me the space to discover what the Inanga could do. what I could do with it. But this sharing is also necessary. This connection with community, this reminder that we are not meant to live entirely alone. The drive back to the cabin is quiet, both Henrik and I tired from the evening but content. When he drops me off, the cabin is dark and cold. I forgot to leave a lamp burning, and I stand for a moment before going in, looking up at the sky. The aurora is dancing again, faint but present, a reminder of all the nights I have spent watching it, playing for it, learning from it. Inside, I light the lamps and rebuild the fire, returning the cabin to warmth and light. I make tea and sit in my chair, the Inanga beside me, and I think about the evening, about all the faces and voices, about the way music can create connection, even across differences of language and culture and experience. But I am also glad to be back here in this small space that has become so familiar, so much a part of me. The festival was good and necessary, but so is this silence, this solitude, this opportunity to simply be without the demands of social interaction. I pick up the Inanga and play, not for anyone else now, just for myself. The notes rise into the warm air of the cabin, mixing with the crackling of the fire and the slight sound of wind outside. And I am content, more content than I can remember being in years, perhaps in my entire life. I realize that this is what I came here to find, not escape from my old life, but a new relationship with existence itself, a way of being that is more present, more aware, more connected to the fundamental rhythms that underlie all experience. The Inanga has been my teacher, the silence my classroom, the northern winter my curriculum. But the lesson is not finished. There are still weeks left of my time here, still more to learn, still deeper to go. I set the instrument aside and walk to the window, looking out at the night. The forest stands in its patient vigil. The snow gleams in the starlight, and somewhere far above, invisible particles from the sun are dancing with the Earth's magnetic field, creating beauty out of physics, poetry out of collision. I press my hand against a cold glass, feeling the temperature difference, the membrane between inside and outside. But it is not a barrier. It is more like a permeable boundary, something that can be crossed in either direction, something that both separates and connects. I stand there for a long time, my hand on the glass, my breath creating small patches of fog, watching as a night performs its slow ballet. And I am grateful for this place, for this time, for the privilege of bearing witness to the world's quiet beauty, for the chance to discover what it means to be fully alive, fully present, fully here. When I finally go to bed, I sink into sleep as if into deep water, descending into dreams that are more feeling than image, more sensation than story. And I am held there in the depths, safe and warm despite the cold outside, sheltered despite the vastness of the wilderness that surrounds me. The Inanga sits in the main room, its strings still faintly vibrating from being played, holding the memory of the notes I created. The fire burns low, its coals glowing with patient heat. And outside, the northern lights fade as the night moves toward morning, their energy spent for now, but never truly gone, always ready to return when conditions are right, when the world aligns in just the right way to create magic out of physics, wonder out of the ordinary materials of existence. And I sleep, and the cabin breathes around me, and the forest stands watch, and the world turns on its axis, carrying me through the darkness toward another day, another chance to listen, another opportunity to play, another moment of being exactly where I am supposed to be, doing exactly what I came here to do.